James Carter had always imagined a place he could call his own, a sanctuary filled with love, history, and a sense of permanence. That dream took root in his heart long before he ever thought it could become a reality. When he unexpectedly inherited his grandfather's two-story Craftsman home in Pine Valley, it felt like fate was aligning with his deepest aspirations. The house, nestled on a quiet tree-lined street, was a symbol of his family's endurance through generations of change. It stood with an air of quiet dignity, though time had taken its toll. The once sturdy roof now sagged in places, and the peeling paint exposed patches of wood weathered by years of neglect. Still, James saw beyond the disrepair. To him, it was a canvas, a place where he could build memories with his wife Sarah and their 5-year-old son Tommy. When James first shared the news of the inheritance with Sarah, her eyes lit up with cautious optimism. She too saw the potential of the old home, but knew it would require a lot of work and money. "We'll have to save up," she said, practicality softening her enthusiasm. James nodded in agreement. Together, they decided to set aside as much as they could, knowing the road ahead would be long, but worth it. Over the next year, James threw himself into his work with renewed purpose. As a financial analyst, his job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. He volunteered for extra projects and took on freelance assignments in the evenings. Each paycheck brought them one step closer to their goal, though it often meant sacrificing family time. Sarah supported him every step of the way, managing their modest Chicago apartment and keeping things running smoothly at home. She often caught James staring at an old photograph of the house, his mind clearly miles away, imagining a future where their son could grow up playing in the same yard where James had once played as a boy. Tommy, too young to grasp the gravity of the project, was thrilled by the idea of a new house. He peppered James with questions about his future room and the yard where he could play soccer. Each question fueled James's determination to make the dream a reality. The months passed slowly, each one marked by small but significant progress toward their savings goal. James often stayed up late, poring over renovation ideas and sketching plans for the house. He imagined a porch swing for Sarah, flower beds lining the driveway, and a kitchen filled with the smell of freshly baked cookies, just like his grandmother's. On weekends, James occasionally drove to Pine Valley to check on the property. Each visit strengthened his resolve. Despite its dilapidated state, the house still exuded a quiet charm. Its ivy-covered walls seemed to whisper stories of the past, and the creaky floors groaned under his steps as if urging him to bring the home back to life. Finally, after a year of sacrifice and hard work, the moment James had been waiting for arrived. Their savings account had grown enough to cover the initial renovations, and he wasted no time contacting Rick, a contractor he trusted, to begin the process. "We're ready," James said over the phone, his voice brimming with excitement. Rick agreed to visit the property that week to finalize the renovation plan. The anticipation was almost too much for James to contain. That evening, he shared the news with Sarah and Tommy over dinner. "We're one step closer to moving into our family home," he announced, unable to hide his pride. Sarah smiled warmly, her hand resting on his. Tommy, ever the bundle of energy, exclaimed, "Can I paint my room blue?" The next morning, James and Rick met at the house to go over the details. Rick walked through the property with a clipboard in hand, noting the repairs that would be needed, reshingling the roof, replacing the porch rails, and refinishing the floors. "It's a big job," Rick said, "but this house has good bones. It's worth restoring." Hearing those words filled James with hope. The home, his family's legacy, was finally going to be revived. He shook Rick's hand and agreed to the plan. The work was scheduled to begin the following week. Over the next few days, James couldn't stop talking about the house. He told his co-workers about the renovations, shared his excitement with friends, and even began making a list of furniture to buy once the work was complete. One evening, as he sat in the living room of their apartment, James looked at the old photograph of the house again. This time, he didn't see peeling paint or a sagging roof. He saw a future filled with love, laughter, and memories waiting to be made. "It's finally happening," he said softly to himself. He closed his eyes and imagined Tommy playing in the yard, Sarah planting flowers along the driveway, and the sound of the front door creaking open as he stepped inside his newly restored home. James went to bed that night feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. The hard work and sacrifices were finally paying off. His dream was within reach, and he couldn't wait to make it a reality. But dreams can shatter in an instant, and James had no idea how quickly his joy would turn to heartbreak. The next morning, his phone buzzed with a call from Rick. "James," the contractor said, his voice tense, "we have a serious problem. You need to come to the house immediately." "It's gone." A knot tightened in James's stomach. "Gone!" he echoed, his voice faltering. "What do you mean, gone?" "It's been demolished," the contractor replied grimly. "There's nothing left but rubble." James's world spun for a moment as he tried to process the words. This couldn't be real. Just yesterday, he had finalized plans to restore the house, a place that had stood for generations in his family. Without waiting to hear more, he grabbed his keys and bolted for the door, his mind racing with questions. The drive to Pine Valley felt endless. James gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. Memories of the home flooded his thoughts. His grandmother's laughter on the porch, the smell of fresh pies wafting from the kitchen, the creak of the old staircase. By the time he turned onto the narrow street leading to the property, his pulse was pounding in his ears. When he reached the site, James slammed on the brakes, the car jerking to a stop. The scene before him was unrecognizable. A thick plume of dust hung in the air, and where the house had once stood, there was now only a chaotic heap of debris. Shards of wood, crumbled bricks, and twisted metal lay scattered across the lot. In the distance, an idle bulldozer stood like a grim monument to destruction. Workers in hard hats lingered near the machinery, speaking in hushed tones. They glanced in James's direction but quickly averted their eyes, as though avoiding confrontation. James stumbled out of the car, his legs trembling beneath him. He took a shaky step toward the rubble, his voice cracking as he shouted, "What happened here?" A man in a neon safety vest hesitantly approached. "Are you Mr. Carter?" he asked, his expression a mixture of unease and sympathy. "Yes, I'm James Carter," he replied, his voice sharp and tinged with desperation. "Now tell me what's going on." The man held out a clipboard. "We were hired to demolish the property," he said, his words measured. "The paperwork is all in order." James snatched the clipboard, his hands trembling as he flipped through the documents. His name and signature stared back at him from the authorization form. But the signature wasn't his. He knew his own handwriting better than anyone, and this was a crude imitation. His mind reeled. Who could have done this? How could someone forge his name and authorize the destruction of his family's legacy? His thoughts were interrupted by the crunch of gravel under tires as a sleek black SUV pulled up to the site. Out stepped a woman dressed in a tailored blazer and designer sunglasses. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her control over a situation. Removing her sunglasses, she fixed James with a cold, calculating stare. "Mr. Carter, I presume? Who are you?" James demanded, his voice rough with anger. "Karen Blaine," she replied smoothly, her tone as polished as her appearance. "President of the HOA." She gestured toward the rubble. "This demolition was necessary. The house was in severe disrepair and violated the community's aesthetic standards." James's fury erupted. "This is my property," he roared, gesturing toward the remains of his home. "You had no right to touch it." Karen raised an eyebrow, her composure unshaken. "According to the paperwork," she said, her voice laced with condescension, "you transferred the property to the HOA last year. And," she added with a pointed smirk, "you signed the demolition approval yourself." Determined to fight back, James sought out Ellen Price, a no-nonsense attorney renowned for taking on corrupt homeowner associations. Her reputation for tenacity preceded her, and James hoped she could help him uncover the truth behind the forged demolition documents. When he met Ellen in her cluttered downtown office, her sharp gaze and brisk demeanor immediately put him at ease. She listened intently as James recounted everything: the demolition, the forged signature, and Karen Blaine's smug confidence. Ellen's jaw tightened as she flipped through the paperwork James handed her. This isn't just HOA overreach, Ellen said, tapping the signature line on the forged document. This is outright criminal behavior. Forging your signature? That's fraud, plain and simple. We'll start by proving this is fake and follow the trail to whoever orchestrated it. Ellen wasted no time. She contacted a forensic handwriting expert to analyze the signature and began poring over property records and HOA documents. I've seen HOAs pull some shady stunts, Ellen said as she sifted through files. But this is next level. As she dug deeper, Ellen began uncovering a disturbing pattern. Karen Blaine wasn't just a president overseeing the HOA, she was a savvy manipulator who knew how to exploit legal loopholes and push her agenda. Emails between Karen and a zoning official revealed her true intentions. In one particularly damning exchange, Karen wrote, "Carter's house is a perfect acquisition. Let's move fast before he notices." This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding, Ellen told James during a meeting. Karen targeted your property deliberately, and based on these emails, I'd bet she's done it before. James felt his anger simmer. He had suspected Karen's motives were shady, but seeing the proof in black and white made it real. "How do we stop her?" he asked. "First we expose her. But be ready. People like Karen don't go down without a fight," Ellen warned. Karen, true to form, wasn't sitting idle. The HOA launched a smear campaign against James, accusing him of neglecting the property and allowing it to fall into disrepair. The accusations were publicized in community newsletters and emails, painting James as a negligent owner who didn't care about his family's legacy. "I can't believe this," James said, holding up one of the newsletters during a late-night meeting with Ellen. "They're making me out to be some careless absentee owner. None of this is true." "It's a classic tactic," Ellen replied, unfazed. "They're trying to discredit you before we can prove what they've done. It's meant to intimidate you, but don't let it." Karen's boldness didn't stop there. One morning, James received a call from the sheriff informing him of a new complaint. Someone had reported hazardous materials being stored on the property. When James arrived at the site, he found several rusted barrels sitting conspicuously among the rubble. "This is ridiculous," James said, snapping photos of the barrels. "I didn't put those there," Ellen agreed. "They're trying to frame you," she said after James shared the photos with her. "This isn't about the barrels. It's about building a case that you're irresponsible. Don't touch them. We'll document everything and prove it's a setup." Meanwhile, Ellen continued to uncover more evidence against Karen. Interviews with former HOA members painted a picture of a woman who thrived on control and intimidation. One former board member revealed that Karen often pushed through questionable decisions by silencing dissenters or bending the rules to suit her agenda. "She's built an empire of fear," Ellen said after one particularly revealing conversation. "But fear only works until someone stands up to it." Despite the mounting pressure, James remained resolute. "They can throw everything they've got at me," he told Ellen during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "I'm not backing down. This isn't just about the house anymore. It's about standing up to people like Karen." Ellen nodded, impressed by James's determination. "Good," she said, "because the more we dig, the more it's clear this is bigger than just your case. Taking her down could set a precedent for others in your position." As the case gained traction, Karen's confident facade began to show cracks, but she wasn't ready to concede. In fact, her actions only became more desperate, as if she could sense the walls closing in around her. James knew he was up against more than just an HOA president. He was fighting a system designed to protect people like Karen. But with Ellen by his side and the truth on his side, he finally felt like he had a chance to win. The courtroom was packed as the trial began, the hum of whispered conversations filling the air. James sat beside Ellen at the plaintiff's table, his palms damp and his heart pounding. This was the moment he had been fighting for, a chance to expose Karen and the HOA for their lies. Ellen stood tall, exuding calm confidence as she began her opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she said, her voice steady, "this case isn't just about one house. It's about justice. It's about holding those in power accountable when they abuse that power for personal gain." Her words resonated with the room, silencing the murmurs. Karen sat at the defense table, her usual smug expression replaced by a tense, measured demeanor. She occasionally whispered to her lawyer, a man who seemed just as sharp as Ellen but far less prepared for what was coming. Ellen wasted no time presenting the evidence. First, she displayed the forged demolition authorization with James's signature. She pointed out glaring inconsistencies in the handwriting, including shaky strokes and mismatched slants. "This isn't James Carter's signature," Ellen declared, her voice unwavering. "This is fraud." An expert witness, a handwriting analyst with decades of experience, was called to the stand. With precise, technical language, she dismantled the legitimacy of the document. "The signature is a crude imitation," the analyst explained. "It lacks the natural flow of Mr. Carter's authentic handwriting. In my professional opinion, it was forged." Karen's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled him. The tension in the room grew as the jury leaned forward, hanging on every word. Ellen, sensing the momentum, moved on to her next piece of evidence, Karen's emails. "Your Honor," Ellen said, holding a stack of printed emails, "these communications between Miss Blaine and a zoning official reveal a calculated effort to seize Mr. Carter's property under false pretenses." The emails were displayed on a large screen, and Ellen read excerpts aloud. In one email, Karen described James's home as an eyesore and ripe for acquisition. The jury's collective gasp was audible. Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her composed exterior beginning to crack. Ellen called a former HOA board member to testify. The man, visibly nervous but resolute, recounted how Karen had pressured the board into approving questionable actions. "She would threaten to remove us from the board if we didn't agree," he said. "Many of us stayed quiet out of fear." If you are enjoying this story of resilience and justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts or similar experiences. When Ellen cross-examined Karen's lawyer's witnesses, she dismantled their credibility with precision. One claimed the demolition was necessary for safety reasons, but Ellen countered with photographs of James's property showing it was structurally sound. The defense's arguments began to crumble. Finally, it was time for Karen to take the stand. She walked to the witness box with her chin held high, but her eyes betrayed her unease. Ellen approached slowly, her questions calculated and deliberate. "Miss Blaine," Ellen began, "did you authorize the demolition of Mr. Carter's home?" Karen nodded. Her voice clipped. "Yes, but it was within the HOA's rights." Ellen's gaze sharpened. "And did you also forge Mr. Carter's signature to approve the demolition?" Karen hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice wavered slightly. Ellen didn't relent. She displayed an email exchange where Karen instructed a colleague to push the paperwork through and deal with the fallout later. The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. "Miss Blaine," Ellen said, her tone firmer, "these are your words. Did you fabricate the documents to demolish Mr. Carter's home?" Karen's facade cracked. Her hands clenched the edge of the witness box, and her voice grew defensive. "I was acting in the community's best interest." "Answer the question," Ellen pressed, her voice razor-sharp. "Did you forge the documents?" Karen's shoulders slumped. Her confidence evaporated as she muttered, "Yes." The single word, though quiet, was like a thunderclap in the courtroom. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. James sat frozen, the enormity of the moment washing over him. The judge banged his gavel, demanding order, but the damage to Karen's case was done. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the jury foreperson rose to deliver the verdict. James Carter held his breath, his hands gripping the edge of the plaintiff's table. This moment felt like the culmination of months of pain, anger, and relentless determination. The foreperson's words rang through the silent room. "We find the defendant, Karen Blaine, guilty of fraud, forgery, and trespassing." A wave of relief swept over James. His shoulders, heavy with the burden of the fight, finally relaxed. The years of deception and Karen's calculated schemes had come crashing down under the weight of the evidence. The judge, his voice stern but measured, handed down the sentence. Karen Blaine, once a towering figure in the HOA world, was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The courtroom murmured in approval, and James could see the shock registering on Karen's face. Her carefully constructed facade of control had finally crumbled. But it wasn't just Karen who faced repercussions. The HOA, as an entity, was held accountable for its role in the fraudulent demolition of James's home. They were ordered to pay a substantial settlement to compensate for the destruction and emotional toll inflicted on James and his family. For James, the verdict was a bittersweet triumph. No amount of money could truly replace the memories and history tied to his family home. Yet the settlement offered a way forward, a chance to rebuild and restore what had been stolen. With Ellen's guidance, James wasted no time putting the compensation to good use. He assembled a team of skilled architects and contractors to bring his ancestral home back to life. Every detail of the restoration was meticulously planned. James wanted to honor his grandfather's legacy and ensure the house stood as a testament to his family's resilience. The construction process was both cathartic and emotional. As workers rebuilt the Craftsman-style porch and reinstalled the ivy-covered trellis, James often found himself reflecting on the past. He thought about the laughter that once filled the halls, the stories told on the porch swing, and the quiet evenings his grandparents must have spent admiring the garden. As the house took shape, it became more than just a building. It transformed into a symbol of triumph over adversity. The walls that once crumbled under Karen's greed now stood tall and proud, a physical reminder that justice could prevail even against the most formidable opponents. But James wasn't content to stop there. His experience with Karen and the HOA had opened his eyes to the vulnerabilities faced by property owners. Too many people, he realized, lacked the resources or knowledge to fight back against similar abuses. With Ellen's help, James founded a nonprofit organization called Guardians of Home. Its mission was simple but powerful: to educate homeowners about their rights and provide legal support to those who faced exploitation by HOAs or other institutions. Ellen's passion for justice made her a natural partner in the endeavor, and together, they set out to make a difference. The nonprofit quickly gained traction, drawing attention from media outlets and local communities alike. James shared his story at events and workshops, his voice resonating with audiences who saw in him a reflection of their own struggles. For many, James became a symbol of perseverance and hope, a reminder that even against overwhelming odds, the fight for justice was worth it. Meanwhile, the fallout for Karen Blaine was swift and severe. Her arrest and subsequent conviction sent shockwaves through the community. Other HOA members, once loyal to her, scrambled to distance themselves from her corrupt reign. As James watched the HOA undergo a complete restructuring, he felt a sense of vindication. The newly elected board, led by a soft-spoken but earnest leader, promised to rebuild trust with the community. It was a stark contrast to Karen's authoritarian style, and James couldn't help but feel a small sense of pride in having played a part in the change.